Hello everyone. As you're probably aware, the second season of Squid Game released recently, and this is a show that I really love. I will admit the second season has been a bit weaker, but I think a lot of that is down to it being split in two rather than one longer season. But Squid Game is great. The art direction, the social commentary, the characters, all around a phenomenal show. But some people don't seem to share my love for it, specifically this video. Squid Game is wrong about capitalism by the Foundation for Economic Education, or FEE, as I will refer to them. Now you may be thinking, that's a weird name for a YouTube channel. Well, you'd be right, because it's actually an outsider institution attempting to push their own narratives through poorly made YouTube videos. I do have to say that this video is like 3 years old, but I've only just seen it, and so I thought I'd make a response. Also, the channel hasn't uploaded in nearly a year. So much for the drive for work that capitalists strive for. So without further hesitation, let's see what they have to say.
It's just, I don't think it's particularly healthy to spend 9 hours wallowing in misery and human suffering. Shows like this reinforce viewers' worst assumptions and beliefs about other people, and in this case, Squid Game paints a very distorted picture of the world.
After almost 3 minutes of character exposition, we get our first point. FEE provides us with an outstanding analysis. Squid Game is bad because it's not healthy to think about bad things for too long. Sure, in the most extreme case, it's not very productive to wallow about in your own self-misery, but this is a TV show with a message to send. This is a common tactic people use against any media criticizing their views. They're wrong because they're being too negative about it. Instead, viewers of Squid Game should all sit in a circle singing Kumbaya and investing in crypto coins. What FEE is recommending we do here is equivalent to shoving our heads in the sand and forgetting about life's problems. They justify this because it reinforces viewers' worst assumptions about people. I wonder why viewers have these assumptions. It's almost like our economy and social life are built around being as greedy and self-centered as possible. If only we look to the divine gods of capitalism for advice, like Elon Musk, who backed out of donating $6 billion to the UN to combat world hunger and instead invested it into his own company, the Musk Foundation. If those at the top, with more money that they could ever spend in 10 lifetimes, are acting in such a self-centered way, what do you think the people at the bottom will do, who face food scarcity, who live at risk of homelessness? How do you think they will act? This isn't to argue the point that human nature is inherently bad and selfish. No, human nature is not fixed or rigid. As the most developed species in the known universe, it would be incredibly naive to think that we can be reduced to such a one-note analysis, let alone for this to be a universal truth applying to every single person dead or alive. For this concept of human nature to be true, it must apply to all without exception, as it is a fundamental of our existence. But we can see people who break from this selfishness in our day-to-day lives. We donate to charities, fundraise projects we deem good. Hell, people even work for free. Look at Wikipedia, the largest database of information humanity's ever constructed, and a large majority of the editors are not paid for its creation or upkeep. I flat out reject this idea of human nature. The numerous experiences of life each person has is too vast to throw a one-fits-all blanket over. Instead, I would argue that human nature is a reflection of the material conditions we find ourselves in. For example, cavemen lived communally, sharing resources as it was the best way of survival for that epoch. Now, in our capitalist world, people live separately from one another and encouraged to hoard their money because money is the means of survival under capitalism. FEE adds that it paints a distorted picture of the world. Do they provide any justification for this? Nope. Squid Game illustrates a microcosm of the world, just over-dramatized as it is a TV show. People are in battle for money. Maybe they aren't killing each other, but the working classes are pitted against one another in the market, like pawns in the hands of capitalists. Proletarianization is the process of stripping the means of production from regular people until they have only their labor power to sell. This labor power, or the promise to utilize said labor power during a specific time frame, becomes a commodity which is placed on the market. Workers must then compete against each other to secure a purchaser of this labor power. For many, this can be a life or death situation. With no purchaser, you will not receive a wage. With no wage, that's no money. With no money, that's no housing, food, clothing, all the basic necessities you need to survive.
But at the same time, many of these people also blame the system for the economic situations they're in. And since the system in South Korea is essentially a private market economy, a lot of reviewers seem to believe that Squid Game is some kind of a dunk on what they call late-stage capitalism.
It's not just the reviewers who seem to believe Squid Game is about capitalism, but the creator himself. In an interview with Variety magazine, Hwang Dong-hyuk says this: "I wanted to write a story that was an allegory or fable about modern capitalist society, something that depicts an extreme competition, somewhat like the extreme competition of life."
Even the North Korean government, impressive beacon of wealth and freedom that it is, announced its approval of Squid Game's supposedly anti-capitalist commentary.
This is typical boogeymanning, an appeal to emotion fallacy. The North Korean government held this view, and the DPKR are evil and scary, so you shouldn't hold this view, because if you do, you're just like them. Bad people can have good views or a correct interpretation of art. It's rare, but you know what they say about broken clocks. Just because someone you don't like holds an opinion, it doesn't immediately invalidate it. For example, Hitler was a vegetarian. Does that make all vegetarians Nazis? No, of course not. And does that make Hitler a good person? God no. Through the satirical line, impressive beacon of wealth and freedom, FEE is trying to appeal to your emotions so you don't think critically about the awful argument they're about to propose.
Her whole motivation for participating in the games is to get enough money to support her little brother and rescue her mom, who's still stuck on the wrong side of the border. Squid Game certainly doesn't make North Korea's brand of totalitarian communism look very fun.
Furthermore, the DPRK is not communist. Even reading the smallest amount of Marx will tell you this. Juche, the actual ideology of North Korea, is a revisionist take on an already misguided stance of Marxist theory. FEE is hoping and preying on your ignorance surrounding Marxism for this argument to work. Also, totalitarian communism is an oxymoron. Totalitarianism is a system of government that requires complete subservience to the state, whereas communism is a stateless society. These things cannot be true at once. FEE then goes on to give a brief explanation of capitalism, but check this out.
Is determined mainly by competition in a free market. Marxists often use the word to describe an entire class of people.
Beautiful rebuttal, bravo FEE. If only Marx had thought of putting fact-checked false in big red letters. Truly, we're seeing the pinnacle of debate and human intellect. How the communists survived such a ruthless argument?
The thing is, an even more important aspect of capitalism is its association with free enterprise or free markets. Historically, what we now call capitalism was a deliberate rejection of top-down economic systems, coinciding with the rise of liberalism and the philosophy of individual rights.
The claim that capitalism is not a top-down system is hilariously erroneous. Capitalism thrives on hierarchy, as it relies on the exploitation of others to generate wealth. To give a quick rundown of capitalist economics, human labor creates value. It infuses value into items which can then be sold at a higher price. Take a coat, for example. If you were to purchase the raw materials that make up a coat, such as buttons and linen, and then construct the coat yourself, you would spend less money than if you were to buy a ready-made coat. Same with a table or a chair. Wooden nails are cheap, but the item itself is expensive. This is because human labor infuses value into a product. So, for a capitalist to make himself rich, he will need people to perform this labor on the raw materials he's brought. As time progressed, this class of workers, what Marx called proletarians, grew and grew as wealth became increasingly concentrated in the hands of the few. The capitalists at the top now have control over the market, and so can influence governments. The reason FEE wants you to think that capitalism isn't a top-down system is because they have done exactly what I've described. The Foundation for Economic Education is a think tank, a research institute comprised of unelected individuals with a lot of power to sway government on policy decisions. since governments often listen to their advice or sometimes work alongside them. Maybe I'm overreacting to all this. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they do just provide education, as their name would imply. But even with the benefit of the doubt, the founder of FEE, Leonard Read, was the general manager of the largest branch of the largest lobbying organization in America, the United States Chamber of Commerce. If you don't know what lobbying is, it's when rich guys influence the government by paying them. It's a form of legally sound bribery. This is such blatant propaganda of elites trying to protect their position in society by feeding the masses straight up lies. I try and keep things positive on this channel, but Jesus Christ, I have no empathy for these Judas demagogues.
What's more, countries which have successfully adopted most of these principles have seen dramatic increases in their standards of living, and they consistently outperform less free economies across every measurable metric for quality of life.
While they claim free markets economy provide the best standard of living, all top-ranking countries use the Scandinavian model, a model that heavily regulates companies and has a vast and accessible welfare system. These are the same nations that free market liberals will turn around and cry socialism, but I guess they count when it serves your point. God, these people are so ideologically flimsy. Just a disclaimer, the Scandinavian nations aren't socialist in the slightest.
Almost all of Gi-hun's problems are self-inflicted. In spite of being reasonably healthy, physically capable, and possessing at least average intelligence, he doesn't do anything remotely productive. He doesn't even try to create value for anybody. Instead, he steals, lies, cheats, and generally doesn't live up to his promises. He mooches off of everyone else and then blames them when things go wrong. The system isn't at fault here, he is.
FEE stands that he cannot feel sympathy for Gi-hun because he's a gambler and it's his life choices that got him there. Without getting into a whole debate about free will or the desperation people feel under capitalism, Gi-hun being a gambler is a really good background for his character and for the message that Squid Game is trying to convey. It takes a person that many people would write off, as FEE so ignorantly does, as an individual suffering as a result of his actions. But then we see his mother fall ill, his only child being taken across the world, his outpour of empathy for the other contestants and the bond he builds with them, his noble fight to take down the games, even putting himself back in risk of death just to help others. The audience sees a real person with emotion and a heart, and can come to the conclusion that he too deserves to live a happy life, even with his past mistakes. Not a life where his best chance of survival is competing in the Squid Games. This wouldn't work as effectively if Gi-hun was purely a victim of circumstance, because the majority of people would already feel sympathetic to his problems. Squid Game goes out to challenge this notion that people hold, to show the true loss of humanity capitalism creates. But no, FEE cannot see past his decisions and the human he is, because their ideological positioning has stripped them of any empathy that might be writhing about in their callous souls. The whole point of Squid Game has gone so far over their heads that I wouldn't be surprised if they mistook it for an asteroid.
Yes, entrepreneurs compete with each other in market economies, but it's to see who's best at providing for the needs and desires of their customers. And we're all rewarded with better standards of living.
No, the best provider does not win in capitalism. Whoever can make the most and at the cheapest price wins. This is basic economics. You could make the most beautiful, high-quality coat, taking hours of your time, but if you're competing against a company that can pump out 50 half-assed coats in the same time it took to make you one, guess who retailers are going to pick?
Far from being exploitative, capitalism as a system harnesses humans' natural self-interest in a way that makes serving your fellow man an essential requirement for success.
Again, I've explained how capitalism exploits your labor and how this myth of human nature is false. These propagandists can only have so many talking points they can harp on about.
The trouble starts when governments interfere with that system. We actually see this happen in the show. In episode 7, the VIPs goad the frontman into altering the rules mid-game. That scene is not so much an allegory for capitalism as it is for cronyism. The more powerful the government is, the stronger incentives people have to try to influence the rules to benefit themselves.
You were talking about yourselves. This is what your institution does. You and your parent company, the State Policy Network, are both think tanks run by the rich to influence governmental policy in favor of the free market. I think I'm losing my mind.
Unfortunately, a lot of people mistakenly blame capitalism for problems that are actually caused by government intervention.
Capitalism is the root problem. I'm not in favor of government intervention in capitalism, but capitalism will fail without government intervention too. If you look at Argentina right now, or the mess that Thatcher and Reagan left of their respective nations. If the economy is doomed with or without, you might need to rethink the whole economy.
I think that's what's really going on with Squid Game. If anything, it's a commentary on cronyism and violent authoritarianism. But more than anything, it's just a show about characters who actively choose not to take responsibility for themselves and wind up being destroyed by their own greed.
Cronyism is a product of capitalism, and violent authoritarianism happens under capitalism too. Capitalism first attacks the mind, ideologically. It socializes you to live under its thumb since you were a child. If that ideological apparatus starts to slip, it can and will use violent force to repress any dissidents. And that's the end of the video, concluding with, it's not about capitalism because I said so. Sorry that this is a bit of a shorter one, I've got so much uni work, it kinda sucks. But I hope you've enjoyed watching. I've been Unijoy, and you have been entertained.